Hi, it's Jo from Minerva. Today I have a little top tips video for you. I'm not sewing anything right at the moment, but it had got me thinking about some of the things that I do on my machine that you might not know about, or if you're new to sewing you haven't heard of, or if you've been sewing a long time you thought, well, I never knew that. Number one is that I have my sewing machine, not always my machine, but definitely my overlocker, on a mat. So I have a little piece of rubber underneath, which gives me less vibration on my table, especially if you're getting a little bit of speed up on a straight seam. My sewing machine can start to shake, and then the needle can be jumping around and the fabric's moving around. So I have a little mat underneath my machine which reduces the noise and reduces the vibration and the chance that my machine is going to start rattling, or the tension discs are moving, or the threads are hopping out of their threaded places. Number two is something I used to dice with in the past, which is to buy a pack of bobbins and not really think about whether they were fit for my machine. So bobbins aren't always the same depth, and sometimes it really is a very small amount of difference between the bobbin that fits your machine and a pack of universal bobbins. So I use Brother machines, and on my Brother sewing machine my bobbin is a little bit shallower than one that I would get if I just bought a bobbin pack. So do get your manual and check whether you have a particular bobbin size so that you can match that using the product description so that you get the right bobbins. If you don't have the right bobbins, you'll have all kinds of stitch tension, threading problems, nests on the back of your threads. I didn't know that for ages. I just sort of thought bobbins were all the same, but they're not. My third thing is still to do with bobbins, which is to make sure that your bobbin is wound evenly and at the same tension. So if when you thread your bobbin, it's all piling up at the bottom, and then you manually move the thread up and start piling it up at the top, then the bottom bit can be cutting into the top bit, so you'll get a tight bit. So your thread won't be coming evenly off your bobbin. So if your bobbin doesn't wind very evenly, you can use your hand just to keep running it up and down, so that when it's coming off the bobbin, it's evenly coming off the bobbin. If this is really sloppy in some particular places, it won't sew well. If it's too tight in some places and sloppy in others, it doesn't do well. If it's really weighted in one area, so it's all wound the bobbin to the bottom, then it's heavy at the bottom and the top will rattle on the top. So make sure that you wind your bobbin really evenly. If you are new to sewing, or you've been used to sewing the same sort of fabric, so you've always sewn with cotton, or you've always liked to sew with stretch, but if you start sewing different fabrics, then you really do need to change needle. And some people say, oh well, I've had a needle and it's been in my machine for a year and a half and it's been fine, and that's probably because they've been sewing the same type of fabric. If you're switching between fabrics, then you definitely need to switch between needles. So I've got a tin, I've got a lot of needles because I'm sewing a lot of different fabrics, but the ones that I really recommend are a top stitching needle. Top stitching with top stitching thread really doesn't even work on my machine unless I use a top stitching needle. It's got a larger hole so that thicker thread can run through really smoothly. I've got Sharps needles, they're a number 60, so they're for really lightweight fabrics, chiffon, georgette, lingerie fabrics, satin, sometimes viscose even, sews much better with a Sharps needle. I have a stretch and a ballpoint for if I'm sewing stretchy fabrics. Sometimes one works better than another on different fabrics. It really does depend on the lycra content. So I tend to use the stretch ones more. I don't use the ballpoint ones quite as much, but it depends on maybe the pressure of your foot and how much elastane or lycra content you've got in your fabric. I have universal needles for if I break a needle, and I also have jeans needles because sometimes I'm making jeans or I'm doing bag making and I'm going through lots of different layers. Now you don't have to have all of those, but you really do need to make sure on a test piece that you have the right needle before you start creating lots and lots of headaches for the project that you're about to sew. You might also get really poor stitch tension if you've got a blunt needle, because the point of the needle isn't as sharp as it was, so it's not piercing through the weave of the fabric, and then you'll get skip stitches. Do you know if your sewing machine has a needle threader? It was one of the things that I had on my wish list for when I bought my previous sewing machine, and a needle threader was really key for me. And then I had it for ages and ages, and I kept going to the manual and I didn't really quite work out how to use it properly, but now it is a must for me. So if you've got a needle threader on your machine and you don't know how to use it, then check out your manual. It makes things super quick when you're swapping over different needles or different threads. I'll give you a quick view of how I change mine, because it might be the same as yours. To use the automatic needle threader, you bring down your thread as usual. I've pulled through plenty of thread because I've got my foot down, so now the thread is locked. And this is how the needle threader works. So you pull this down and it rotates this needle threader here. So you hook the thread from left to right around that hook, and then the thread goes between the needle threader to the back. Before you start this procedure, your needle needs to be in the up position, the highest it will go, so that the needle threader hooks around the eye area of the needle. Number 6, well, you're all ready to sew and you're trying to get your fabric to get started and it's chewing up under your machine a little bit. So let's see how we can get a really good start by using the bobbin threads and the needle thread to make sure that our fabric gets onto the feed dogs. If you're getting a bit of a chewed up end when you first start to sew, but you want to make sure that you are sewing right to the very end of the fabric, then you can take one stitch and then you can use these threads, the bobbin and the needle thread together, and just use those on your next stitch to pull the work up onto the feed dogs. It normally chews at the end because the work isn't being fed through yet. It's just ending up staying in the same place, so the needle just keeps chewing in the same place. So especially on light fabrics it works particularly well, or a stretch fabric. You can just pull up the work onto the feed dogs using the threads. Don't pull those threads anymore now because that will affect your tension. Just keep sewing. Means your seam runs straight to the end without chewing or kinking that bit in there. So give your threads a little tug. Number 7 is a did you know. So did you know that when your foot is down, the tension discs in here are clamped shut, so you can't pull through your spool thread. It's sort of really locked in. So if you're trying to thread a needle and you haven't got enough thread to get your sort of hand in, and you've got your foot down to try and give you a little bit more room, if you try and pull on the threads, they're locked in the tension disc, so you'll be really dragging and pulling your thread. So if you want to pull some thread, you need to lift the foot, pull out as much thread as you need, put the foot down so you've got a little bit more room to see the eye of the needle and thread through. So if you're threading up all of your machine, you've got free running thread here, and then say for example you want a little bit more room to get at your needle for threading. If you cut your thread off a little bit short and then you try to pull it, this isn't pulling now. You need to lift up the foot, pull through more thread, and then you can pull it down. Or use your needle threader. I experienced something the other day, which was a really great little secret to let you into, which is I was making some jeans and I was running dangerously close to running out of top stitching thread for the hems. And I was starting to panic because I thought, gosh, I'd need a whole roll of top stitching thread just to finish the hems. But I checked out a couple of my books and manuals and I realised that you can use 2 lines of polyester also thread through a top stitching needle and it gives you double the gauge, which is about the same as top stitching thread. I'll show you, it looks really, really good. I'm just using up a few nearly finished spools just to show you, but I've got my second thread spool on the top of my machine and I can thread the machine following the same route as my previous spool and then thread those 2 threads as one and it will act as a top stitching thread. You probably need a top stitching needle here so that you've got a big enough eye to thread 2 pieces through, or you can use your needle threader. Just get a really nice thick top stitching thread. This was my actual top stitching from my jeans and this is really nice and thick. This one, the bobbin thread is showing through a bit, so I just changed my tension down just to take that back, and this second line is much better. It's just as thick as a top stitching thread. My final sewing machine secret is that I write everything down. So even though I come on here on a video and it looks like it's all out of my head, well, actually I write down quite a lot of the stuff that I found out, particularly in trial and error or little test pieces, because I think I'm going to remember it and I really, really don't. So I like to keep a sewing journal or a sewing planner, and that way I can put in a little fabric swatch. And I don't always do that, but I do write down any of my stitch lengths, stitch widths, things that were particularly good. Particularly if I did like on my jeans, I did a little bar tack and it was a really nice bar tack and it was, the stitches were really nice and close and they were just the right width. And so I wrote down the bar tack in the page for jeans, because then next time I do it, I won't have to do lots and lots of experimenting. So writing down what you found out is a really great way to keep moving on with your progress on your sewing machine. How did you do today? Did you know any of my sewing secrets? I'm sure you did, but hopefully you found something out new today. We would love to see what you have been making, so do head over to Minerva, make a free account and share your makes and any projects that you are up to at the moment. We love to see what fabrics you are choosing and which patterns you are pairing them with. It's really great and inspirational to other Minerva makers. Well, see you soon. Thank you very much. Do call again.